Welcome to Mental Wealth, the podcast to invest in your mind. Here I will help you make sense of your mind and behaviours, giving you the tools to have your best life. There is so much to share, so let's get into this episode and explore another great topic.
So welcome to episode 30. And this is our last episode for 2023. And in this episode, we are going to talk about Christmas, but some of the kind of other side of Christmas. So not necessarily the mince pies and the mulled wine, but maybe some of the reality and how sometimes we have this pressure around Christmas being perfect. And I couldn't have thought of anyone better to share this space with me than my lovely friend, Naomi Victoria. So welcome, Naomi.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here with you.
Oh, it's great. And you and I wrote an article together for Cheshire Life, which is currently in the Christmas edition now. And that's why, again, it just feels so right for us, doesn't it, to bring to life that article and what we think about Christmas. But firstly, tell everyone a little bit more about you.
So I'm Naomi Victoria, as you've said. Victoria is actually my middle name. I dropped my surname a while ago and fully stepped into my name of Naomi Victoria when I became an author and wrote my first book. But I say I am passionate about people, positivity and products. I'm a huge lover of life. And I like to work with people to help them feel good in the everyday, however, which way I do that, whether that's working with them in education in terms of mental health and suicide prevention, or whether it's creating products that they feel good to wear, or to, candles that light up life. So there's lots of different things that I do.
Brilliant. And we're both sitting here with our lovely hoodies on. I've got mine that says I'm being me, and you've got one that says hope. So how beautiful is that?
We're wearing hugging our hoodies, and they're beautiful because they've got thumb holes and it's quite cold outside today.
Exactly. It's proper Christmassy. Okay, so let's just think about Christmas and how it can be such a magical time. And it's got so much potential to be magical because of all the things that tradition tells us or that things tell us. But for some, it can be so hard, can't it? And I want to talk about the good stuff, but I do want us to home in on kind of a little bit of the reality, what it might be like for some people. And then I think let's do our kind of top tips for how to make this Christmas period as fun or as relaxing as possible. So what do you like?
When you say for some, I actually think for many. So I think there's a lot of people, we have a perception of Christmas being all, glitz and glamour and celebrating and all the kind of superficial stuff, where I think very often most people have other feelings that come up, feelings of pressure or stress or overwhelm or feelings of anxiety, because we get into this period where it's quite forced in terms of the dates and the kind of the run up to the festive season and all the things that we see online. We talk a lot, don't we, about things that are happening in the media. Every time you switch the television on, it's like this so-called perfect family Christmas of everybody gathering and having an amazing time. And whilst many of us have pockets of that amazing time, most of us have pockets of stress, overwhelm, frustration, and all of the other things that come with it. And, I don't know anybody actually that I've spoken to that Christmas is seamless, or actually any of life is seamless. We all have it's all ebbs and flows, isn't it? So
I think so. And I think that's the bit that I like to highlight, is that sometimes the pressure comes because of the ideal. We're trying to make it ideal and perfect and wonderful. But reality is, it's really hard to do that because we're all busy anyway. So we're all trying to manage our jobs and our work and our normal life. And then suddenly we've got all these other things thrown in, like buying people presents and decorating the house and buying the shopping and things that just feel so much more. And then I think that pressure around trying to make it perfect is so much more difficult. And then we've got that sort of just that general hassle factor the bit around, what is hassle? You suddenly realise that you've run out of sellotape, or something that just is quite small, but actually suddenly stacked up, it suddenly feels like a big deal. And I think, again, we need to pause and think about what actually is going on.
Yeah, I think totally. I think it is just that, like you said, like the added, I'm going to use that word pressure again, the pressure of everything and the deadline date of everything has to be done by this date because the shops are closing or the online shopping's ending, or and we'll talk about money again in a little bit, because I know that's a huge thing for many. But I think it is when the lists get bigger, don't they? The to-do list gets bigger.
Yeah.
And there's just so much pressure, isn't there, always round? We talk about lots of the same thing, but we talk about slightly different things as well in terms of experiences that we've had in our lives. And I know one thing I talk about hugely is loneliness at Christmas. So like the pressure of the perceived family life, and then actually if you are not in that dynamic of being able to be surrounded by family and being alone, of how that actually makes you feel around the festive season, when it's almost like rammed in our faces that that's the ideal. But equally loneliness when you are in a family scenario but you're lonely. People can be lonelier in a marriage, in a relationship, than they actually are if they are physically alone. So loneliness is something like I talk about a lot. And I think during this time of year, it is hugely heightened.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think whatever your scenario is, you might not have the relationships in your families. I mean, that is actually part of my story, is I don't have the relationship with some people in my family, some significant people. And then at Christmas, it just feels really exaggerated that they're not there. It might be that they're actually not there from a grief perspective, or sometimes they are there, but they're not there in your life. And it can feel really horrible, actually. I mean, I've had a few moments of thinking like that myself this year, as I would every year. So I think it is about that perfect ideal, and then the reality for so many people, it's just so much harder for that, like you say, that spotlight. It's like, now's the time when we all do these wonderful things and have all this wonderful time. And actually the reality is not that. And I think with relationships, again, I work with a lot of people around relationships, and sometimes the thought of being stuck in with the person that you actually haven't really got on with all year round, but suddenly all the other things are not there. You're not going to work. You're not getting that space. And how many people actually are in that position?
Yeah, totally. I think across the board, whether, I talk about like empty nesting and all sorts of stuff, but firsthand, I've experienced quite a lot of loss in my life. I've lost my mum, my dad, my brother, and each year, obviously, that does. I find different ways. Well, we said we'd talk about ways. I have a bit of a ritual on Christmas Eve, actually, where I start to prep Christmas dinner and things, because I go to my sister's for Christmas, but I help out, so I kind of do stuff Christmas Eve. But I make flower arrangements, so I make wreaths on Christmas Eve for my loved and lost, which we then take on either late Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And that's become a really lovely way for me to kind of feel connected with those family members and be able to kind of like light a candle and feel that around that time. So there is things that we can do that help us sort of connect with that. Where we always used to have a family kitty, because we had a really big family. So I had my dad, my stepmom, and half brothers and sisters. We had like a big extended family, and that has dwindled over the years. That then I still feel like I've got that gift in the kitty. We still put the money in the kitty, which buys the kind of flowers and things like that, which is nice, because it feels that sort of comes together. But I think whether it is, there's people that are coming out of relationships, there is people that have lost loved ones. There's also, the whole empty nesting syndrome. And, you know, I know myself, I've got teenage girls, I'm a single mom, they're growing up. My 19-year-old's off away abroad at the moment. And I think when the dynamics start to change there, where they get boyfriends and partners and then want to have Christmas elsewhere, then there's a change in balance there as well, isn't there, in terms of you feeling not, you know, the loneliness kicking in of actually the dynamics are changing. So there's lots of different aspects of it. But I think it is how you learn to connect with yourself during those times, and actually filling your own cup up and finding things that help you as an individual.
Yeah, because I think if you don't do that, if you don't put any attention on what you need, then you end up just probably sitting with all the thoughts of what's not there anymore, the fact it's changed, the fact that person isn't there, that all whatever it is that's happened to you, you end up then feeling quite stuck, really. And I think that's something that can happen if we don't pay attention to the what are you going to do about it.
Yeah, I was actually out walking with my friend early this morning, and I was talking about two words, which is rejection and abandonment. And those are two words that come up quite a lot, actually, in terms of loneliness. And it's not always rejection. You know, even loss brings feelings of abandonment. And if you're not invited somewhere, so, you know, if you're single and people are having a couple's dinner party and you don't get invited, or, you know, I remember actually when I first got divorced, of couple's party happening, sort of dinner parties and things like that around the Christmas time, and neither of us being invited because people didn't want to take sides. So therefore, then you're both sort of like feeling that feeling of rejection. So rejection doesn't necessarily have to be a feeling when, you know, like a relationship's ended,
or not at all.
Just that inner feeling that comes up. So for me, I'm often going, right, so I personally work with a plan A, plan B. So I kind of go, here's the plan A of what I think I would like to happen this Christmas. But, you know, if the kids decide that they're going to go off to the dad's for a week because they've got stuff going on here, or they're going to friends, or they're having sleepovers, what is my plan B? So that I'm always looking after and I'm not feeling lost, alone, abandoned, rejected, to actually just have that plan B in for myself.
I think it's really important that we're talking about these things at Christmas time, because this is this sort of dilemma that I think people are in, is that we aren't necessarily being honest with how we might be feeling. So then we don't put anything in place because we're so busy looking at the dream Christmas on TV and all the stuff that people create. And actually, you know, it isn't like that at all. And I think something else that I've thought of, a few things as you were talking there, is about that relationship you've got with yourself around expectations. I think it's so important, isn't it? Again, the scenario would be, you've got a grown-up family now, and then people are going to partners' families, and you're now not going. And how do you manage all of that? And how some people feel very stretched, don't they? They're trying to see that person on Christmas morning, and then that person for dinner, and then that person in the afternoon. And it just is exhausting.
For just one day, believe it or not.
Well, that's what I often used to that was one of my strategies if I was ever in that situation, was think, hang on, it's just one day. Surely we just stretch the whole thing out and just see people across the holiday period, and not be obsessed with this one day that we must fit ourselves and be in 10 places at once.
Totally. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, as much as we can unpick that pressure on ourselves to go, you know what, it's actually okay to say, I'm not seeing you on Christmas Day, I'm going to see you Christmas Eve or Boxing Day, or even, you know, that lull that we have in between Christmas and New Year, where we go from being like fully charged and fully under pressure to then actually we do create ourselves a bit of a void very, very often.
Yeah.
And that has its own, you know, emotions and things that come up sometimes at that time. So I think it is about putting it all into perspective, isn't it? And,
I think so. And I think it's, you know, again, often people feel lost when you talk about that lull period in between. And if you're not going into work, people do need to have something to kind of structure, a little mini structure. But I think one of the things I like to talk about is that internal chit chat, the obligations, the shoulds, the oughts. I must do it. I've always done this. no one else is going to do it if I don't. And when we get sort of underneath that, when we sort of lift the lid on that, it's not actually often true. People often aren't expecting you to do Christmas, or, if you actually have the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to come that day, not this day. Most people are like, okay. I mean, obviously there'll be some kickback.
It's about opening up conversations, as is everything in life, of actually not, like you say, having the courage, not sitting in the fear that you're going to be judged if you step up and say, how do you feel? It doesn't necessarily have to be going, I'm doing this. How do you feel if we switch it up this year and we do, we work it a slightly different way? What you will potentially find is that the other person or the other people involved in that are actually quite relieved that you've come up with a suggestion, because they're feeling the same, but nobody's actually opened the conversation up to have it in the first place.
And that's it, isn't it? It's just being able to sort of speak up. And I use the word courage a lot in what I talk about, because, courage, yes, it's going to feel a bit scary if you, for the first time in 20 years, you're going to suggest something different. But as you say, sometimes it's a relief. And I think the other thing that I always think about is, if they are people who genuinely care about you, and you've explained maybe, we don't have to justify why we're asking for this, but maybe explained why this might work better for you. If they care about you, generally, most people will go, of course, you need to do that. If they don't, if they are judgy, and when again, this was a bit of my experience, I used to get judged for it. They're not really caring for me at all. They're just talking about themselves and they're feeling bothered. And I think it's having the courage to stand in your own truth, isn't it? I mean, that's our whole thing about our affirmations, isn't it, Naomi, about standing in your truth, my hoodie says here, I'm being me. If I'm not being me, then I'm probably doing things for other people that actually isn't right.
And I think what that comes from, where you mentioned then about, somebody stepping up and actually, feeling uncomfortable, having the courage and speaking and saying that, is the other person, if they do react badly, it's probably because you're triggering their wounds in terms of rejection and abandonment, of them taking it about them instead of looking at the situation of you and how that dynamic is. So it's kind of like, if somebody says to you, I'm not going to come for Christmas, because it's easier for me to be able to come to do Boxing Day or something else, them going, what's wrong with me? Why don't they want to come to Christmas, with me? Did they not enjoy themselves last year? And actually internalizing that. So I think it's advice to people on both ends of knowing that, if somebody says something like that, it's not you. Don't take it personally that it's you. It's just about having the conversation and both being human beings with our own, beliefs and needs and wants and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a judgment is something that I talk about a lot, inner judgment and external judgment, because, as much as you feel judged by other people, our internal critics that play out are sometimes
the worst. They are
I have a little mind we all have mind monkeys, don't we, that sit on our shoulder telling us what we should, that word should, what we should be doing, or we're not doing good enough, or all of that, even down to, so I joke, and I don't want to offend anybody because I'm going to say the name of my mind monkey. It's nothing personal if anybody's called Felicity, but I did name my mind monkey a few years ago Felicity, and she's an absolute pain in the bum, because she's a massive perfectionist, and she has to have everything absolutely perfect. Nothing's ever good enough. And thankfully over the years I have silenced her a lot. So again, if you have got that sort of inner dialogue playing out, is sometimes giving it a bit of an identity. I can identify when she's playing out, when she wants me to rewrap the Christmas presents because they don't match wherever I'm going, or the bows aren't done perfectly, which you'll know I love bows because I create them with my products all the time. But she is a massive perfectionist, and even in the office now, I joke and I go, right, Felicity's taking over now, so we just need to go and have a cuppa and carry on, because she's quite an extreme perfectionist. So I think it is sometimes about identifying that inner critic, giving it a bit of an identity, and being able to tell it to be quiet, because it's not actually helpful. It's not helping you in any way, shape or form.
I think that I love that. And I've done a lot of that in my work myself and others. And I don't mind sharing with you, I had mine at some point were like 3 little kids, and they were only ever allowed to come on my days out or come out with me if they were quiet in the back seat. I would have this whole dialogue with these 3 little kids that were really naughty and really giving me a hard time. But I think coming back to your point, which I think is really powerful, is when we feel upset, offended, rejected, as you say, abandoned by other people's behaviours. I always talk about that emotional brain that is connected to all of your inner beliefs is 5 times quicker than anything that's logical. Yeah. So when someone says, "Oh, can I talk to you about Christmas?" It's like, boom, oh my gosh, it's there. That response is there. And what I always talk about this in leadership, in teamwork, and individually, is just being able to just manage that little bit of feeling, and then we can think a bit straighter, then we can think a little bit more. But if we respond with that feeling, that's where you go to the, I've been rejected, they don't like me anymore, oh, they must have had a horrible time last year, because the brain makes up things when it hasn't got anything in there.
And I think actually, if you do need to have a conversation about Christmas, instead of saying I need to talk about Christmas, which then I'll go, or get defenses up of going, I've been thinking about Christmas, and then move quite quickly into it of, I've been thinking about Christmas, and I feel this year for me, it would be better, and do make it about you.
About you. Yeah, that's a good strategy, isn't it?
So, and the same goes for present giving, doesn't it? Because that's always a tricky one as well, when particularly in family dynamics where you've got different, maybe different financial capabilities, let's say that.
Yeah.
And one person in the family might be thinking, absolutely dreading the thought of Christmas because of the expectation that they feel that they need to give the gifts that other people are giving them, and the giving receiving bit and all of that. So I think that's equally allowing yourself to be open and being able to think about things that maybe just a little bit thoughtful, as opposed to expensive or none at all, and going, do you know what, this year I'm just not in a position to be able to do it. But again, it's about conversation, isn't it? It's about communication. It's about, having the courage to be able to have those conversations. And equally, if somebody does want to give, so say if you're in a position where, you literally can't afford Christmas because you've just got, your family to prioritize in terms of your kids, or, people that maybe if you've got younger children that kind of won't understand so much that Santa hasn't been or whatever else. But then actually speaking to other members of the family to go, if they still want to give to you, actually, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't have to always be on equal, I think sometimes the pressure of, well, she's spending that much on me, so I need to spend that much on her, of actually ditching a little bit of that, because it's, it's not what Christmas is all about, let's face it. So I think, again, it's just about the communication lines there, isn't it?
Yeah. It feels to me like almost like permission, give yourself permission for it to be okay to buy whatever or treat somebody in a different way. I think we've become a bit better at being more creative around gifts, but I do also know that there are so many people who have this sort of idea in their head that they need to spend, £100 on each person, and is it realistic? It probably isn't. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are very worried about money. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I think Christmas just puts a great big hole in what they were already worried about.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's have a little think. We've done a few as we've been going along, a few little tips, but a few of our tips. And I think one of the ones that I know we've talked about before is that being okay with taking some time out. If you've got a house full of people or a big, massive schedule of social activities or whatever we want to call them across the Christmas period, but actually giving yourself permission and creating the space to just be on your own, or go for that walk, or do something that have that bath in the middle of the day if you want to, something that you almost wouldn't normally do. And I know you definitely like to talk about people doing that kind of thing.
100%. And it's something, the reason why I like to talk about it a lot is because something I never used to do. So if you'd met me probably 10, 15 years ago, I was such a massive people pleaser. I had no personal boundaries in place at all. And it's actually exhausting. And everything I did was, I had the need for external validation all of the time. I was quite a drama queen. And I actually used to probably place my happiness on everybody else's responsibility. So I used to make it everybody's responsibility to make me happy. And if they've upset me, then I'm unhappy. And over the years, I've done a huge amount of self-development work and, understand and create my own inner happy, and know that it is fully my responsibility to step into my own happiness. And that's where a lot of my routines and my own personal boundaries have come in. I was actually laughing a bit this morning because I've been so busy at work for the last few weeks, obviously because we're doing products that are busy around Christmas time, all year round, but particularly busy at the moment with Christmas and sales and all of that kind of stuff, that I've let some of my own personal self-care drop off a bit, and I've felt anxiety coming in. So I couldn't sleep last night, and I woke up in the early hours feeling really anxious. And I do a lot of breath work, meditation, cold water therapy, all of that. So in the middle of the night, I was doing some breath work and meditation, and I've had a freezing cold shower this morning, which I know is not everybody's cup of tea, but I know that is really good for me. It will silence any anxiety that's coming up. It will literally level me and make me okay. I've done my journaling, I've done some cards, and I will nail today, because I'm going into the day with my own cup filled up in my own way. And that's different for everybody. I know that. But it's about finding the things that work for you. You mentioned getting outside and walking in nature. As a child, that's something I hated to do. My dad said we were going to go for a walk. I thought it was like the most terrible thing. Why would you want to walk when you could just sit and watch TV all day? But now I love nothing more than, wrapping up and getting out on a walk. I've been out this morning walking, colder the better for me, and connecting with nature, because sometimes the smallest things, it's free, isn't it? We don't need any money for that. We can breathe in that lovely fresh air and experience nature in many forms, whether that's by water, even if it's just down the street, and when doing that, I like to practice a lot of mindfulness. So even just like, people perceive meditation that you've got to kind of sit in a meditation stance. And although I do have a Buddha in front of me, I don't sit with a Buddha to meditate. You can meditate while you're out walking. You can literally just stop, look at a leaf, look at all the details. I love it when it's really frosty and you can see a spider's web and you can actually see all the intricate details of all of that. Of actually just focusing and helping yourself to silence your mind. And to bring you back to self. So thinking about, the things that you want to do and how you're feeling, and really checking in with yourself. So walking in nature for me is massive. But equally, if you don't want to walk in nature, sitting in front of a fire, if you haven't got a fire, I sometimes put a YouTube clip on my TV that is a fire, because you get that whole crackling sound. So something I would do to help myself in between Christmas and New Year, if I needed to recharge, yes, I'd walk in nature and I'd do my cold and all of that. But I actually might just allow myself to snuggle up with my duvet and watch Christmas movies, because that is something I'm on the go all the time. Like, I just never stop. So that is so unlike me to do something like that would probably feel like a real treat for me to actually stop and
me too.
Watch some Christmas movies.
I think it's making sure that whatever it is that you want to do, that you can prioritize individually yourselves, because I think there's so many people out there who are just giving and doing for everyone else all of the time, particularly at Christmas. If people are mums and dads and trying all that whole thing going on. And I think it is just being okay with, like you say, just down tools and just go and permission to. And I think that's where we lose, with the pressure of Christmas, we lose that. There is going to be a little bit of not the routine. So let's embrace it. Let's do the sitting on the sofa and watching 2 movies on the trot, if that's what you want to do, or giving yourself permission, that feels to me like a sort of strong thing. So we've got courage around maybe speaking up, and then we've got giving yourself permission to just say, do you know what, I don't need to do anything else today. People often say to me, I couldn't possibly do nothing. But I often say, well, you're never doing nothing, are you? You're doing something, and the something is that nourishing, loving self-care type of activity.
Yeah, and it is that. And I think in the stopping and the silencing, I'm trying to think of the lovely Donna Ashworth, the poet. She's got a quote that she says, unstoppable, they said, but it was actually in the stopping that she found her power. And it is that actually when we can stop and really connect with ourselves, and you talk about, and I talk about a lot, going within and actually looking at yourself. And when we're in this busy mode, we can't possibly hear ourselves think in action. And particularly around the Christmas period, when you've got other, there's not just like your internal chatter, you've got, generally other people around you, or if not, you're getting information and a lot of, messages around this whole perfectionism thing.
Yeah.
Literally wherever you look, even, on socials, on telly, every time if you walk through the shop, it's everywhere, isn't it? So I think that can often feel overwhelming, and we use that word pressure. Yeah, again, we've used it a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about whatever. So here we are, we're a few weeks in before Christmas now. It's about just pausing and noticing, okay, what is actually going on for me right now? Am I kind of gliding into Christmas and I'm quite organized and I'm really looking forward to it? Or have I got this internal anxiety? And what is causing that? Is it pressure that is self-pressure that's unnecessary and you could actually reduce a bit of that? Is it because you're doing things that you don't want to do? I mean, I talk about when you say yes to something that you don't want to do, and you then feel really annoyed and angry with yourself or upset with the other person. I call those dirty yeses.
Love because dirty, yeah. It's a great word.
Yeah, but they are though, aren't they?
Yeah, because what you actually mean is no, but you can see yourself nodding your head and going, yeah, we can do that. And every part of you goes, why did I
do that? And as soon as you then pick up the why did I do that, and then you cross with yourself, or you cross with the other person, or you feel resentful, then that's a dirty yes. You should not have said yes. You might have said, I can't today, but I could then. Or there's alternatives to saying no, because I know some people are terrified of saying no for fear of rejection.
Yeah.
The fear of what will people think, for fear that people will think that you're no good because you've said no. But actually, again, those nice, safe boundaries that say, do you know what? I can't do that today. Then when you do say yes, it's a nice, clean yes.
Absolutely. I love that.
Nice. So anyone listening in today, it's just about having a little mini assess of kind of where are you? Because when we don't do the mini assess, if we are really super anxious, we're not present. We're not going to create the memories that we want to have for Christmas, whether that is just sitting watching movies. That's certainly on my list. I am going for the sitting with my duvet on the sofa for definite. But I think we can then enjoy it, and it being the whole thing. And I think that's where we need to pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah.
Any other last little tips that you really...
For me, it would be boundaries and plan B. So in terms of just making sure that you are keeping aligned with your own personal boundaries, of which aligns with your dirty and clean yeses for sure. But equally in that, your kind of self-care boundaries of whether that's a hot soak in the bath after a busy day, or the night before you're going to have a busy day, or when you've put the kids to bed before you start cleaning the house and cooking and everything else, that you literally just take that time, whether it's a walk around the block or snuggling up on the sofa for 10 minutes and having a cup of tea, but actually doing that consciously and being present in that you're really not just doing 5 gazillion things while you're having that cup of tea, of just sitting and being, and maybe just kind of connecting and just go, what is it I need right now? Whether you do that in the morning or the evening, just spending those, it can be just under a minute, to be able to just sit and go, what does Naomi need today? And just sort of thinking of that, and then having a plan B. So if you do feel, that expectations are there, go with your plan A, but always just have a bit of a backup plan so that you're not then going into, any feelings of aloneness and rejection, abandonment, that type of stuff. A plan B is always a good option.
Yeah, I like that. I think it is important, isn't it? Because we set such rigid expectations. And then when we're dealing with other people or things, I mean, the weather sometimes can be the thing that stops people doing things. If there's snow or there's ice or something, it's always not being so disappointed. I mean, I can remember, you talked before about your former self. I would have been so disappointed if something didn't go to plan, like devastated. And it just doesn't serve you, does it? Because stuff will happen. Life's
uncertain, isn't it? And I talk about actually lockdown a lot of we all lived through uncertainty. We all had to get really comfortable with uncertainty. And it's only the same thing, like life is uncertain. And we put these expectations on, but actually anything could happen tomorrow, this afternoon, in the next 10 minutes. We don't know what's going to happen. So I think the more we can the more we can get comfortable with uncertainty, the better. And if you are a little bit like me that likes to have I like a plan, I like a list, I like all of that stuff, which is why I like to have my plan A and my plan B, because then it just gives me that layer to kind of fall on, if you like, if I do plummet a little bit, if I'm meant to be going out and plans get cancelled last minute, where that I'm not going to I spend quite a lot of time alone. If my daughters are going off and doing stuff, I've got a lot of friends, so I'm very lucky. But it's sometimes if a plan doesn't go to plan, then it is going to be alone. But actually, I never feel alone as I am, because I've learned to really love myself and connect with my own inner happiness. But as long as you're aware of that and know that, I'll know straight away, well, it's all right, because if that happens, I'm going to literally sit, do some journaling, I'm going to watch a movie, I'm going to have a hot bath, or I'm going to go and do something else. But just having options, I would say, of leaving a few plan B options in place.
I think so. I think as well, it's just noticing, isn't it? If you don't feel right, as soon as you can notice, I mean, I talk about this so much, is as soon as you can notice that you're just feeling a bit low or a bit anxious, anytime, but particularly this time of year, because it will feel more exaggerated, just think about a lot of the things we've talked about today, and just what's your one thing that you're going to do? What is it that you're going to do that's rather than sit with that horrible feeling at this time of year? I would urge people to go and find something else. Other times of year, I sometimes urge people to sit with their uncomfortable feelings, because there's so much goodness come out of there. But I would say for this time of year, go and do that nourishing thing, or that reach out to someone else.
And I think while we're on that subject, it is worth mentioning that this time of year, with all the additional pressures and to conform and have this perfect life, if you are struggling, reaching out and getting help. So, I'm very well aware in the work that I do, and as are you, Alison, with the work that you do, that there are some incredible charities out there that can help and support you. So if you are struggling, please do use one of the amazing helplines. So for me, it will be Samaritans. Under 35, there's an incredible charity called Papyrus, which they have Hopeline as the line. Andy's Man Club, they meet 7:00 on a Monday. Every Monday, they don't do bank holidays, but apart from that, I have a big signposting section on my website. And what I would say is, speak to a family or friend member. If you can't speak to a family or a friend member, make sure that you reach out and contact one of the amazing charity lines.
I think that's a brilliant reminder. And we'll put all of those in the show notes so that people can click straight through if they do feel the need to speak to someone else, because you won't be the only one. And absolutely. I think that's something so important to remember.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to mention with that as well, there is a perception that if you are worried about somebody else, which very often happens. You know, I have a lot of people that reach out to me to say, I'm worried about a family member. They don't know that they can actually contact those same helplines. So it's not just if you are struggling, you can also contact those helplines if you are worried about somebody, to get hands-on advice of what to say, how to cope with the situation, and all of that. So I know a lot of people have said to me, well, I don't want to waste their time. You're not wasting their time. That is exactly what they are there to do and help you with.
Brilliant. That's a great reminder, because I think it is worrying when you've got somebody that you're really, really worried about. And I think family members do need to feel, or friends do need to feel, they've got somewhere they can go to.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing this space with me.
It's been lovely to be here. So thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So this is our last episode of 2023. We are rolling and having a little mini break from creating Mental Wealth, our podcast, and we'll be back in January. So I just want to wish everyone a really, really happy time, whatever that might be, small, big, or indifferent, and all the things that Naomi and I have talked about today. I want to also thank everyone for listening during this period. We've been running this podcast since May this year, and we've created 30 episodes. And I'm so grateful to everyone who has listened in, and to all my wonderful guests. But thank you, Naomi, for today, and have a wonderful Christmas too.
You too.
Thank you for listening and sharing in this episode of Mental Wealth. Remember, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcast. My last question to you is, what is the one small thing that you can take action on from this episode? Message me on Instagram or through our website with questions you'd like me to explore. You'll find the links in the show notes. I'll be back with more tools and tips to make sense of your mind in the next episode. In the meantime, be kind to yourself. Bye for now.